Welcome, dear friend, to a gentle journey through the world of spices. Tonight, we'll explore the quiet miracles hidden in your kitchen cabinet, the ancient stories preserved in powders and pods, the connections between distant lands and your dinner table. Let the day's worries dissolve as we wander together through cinnamon forests and pepper vines, through saffron fields glowing gold in mountain sunlight. There's no hurry here, no test tomorrow, just the simple pleasure of discovery before sleep finds you. If you enjoy this journey, a gentle like helps others find this peaceful place, and subscribing means we can travel together again. But for now, settle deeper into comfort. Let your breathing slow and allow wonder to wash over you like a warm tide. Let's begin. Vanilla beans grow inside orchids that bloom for just one day. Picture this. A delicate flower opens at dawn in a tropical forest, and if it isn't pollinated by sunset, that chance for a vanilla pod vanishes forever. Each orchid flower, creamy white and fragrant, must be hand-pollinated by human hands in most of the world. A practice started by a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmund Albius on Reunion Island in Iba-Sayi. He discovered the gentle technique of lifting the tiny flap that separates the flower's male and female parts, making vanilla cultivation possible outside Mexico, where natural pollinators exist. Today, someone must visit each flower individually, performing this delicate act before the sun climbs too high. The vanilla pod that flavors your ice cream began with this single day of possibility, this brief window when flower becomes fruit. But vanilla pods don't smell like vanilla when you pick them. They're green, firm, and odorless, holding their secrets tightly. The transformation requires months of patient alchemy. Farmers blanch the pods in hot water, then wrap them in blankets to sweat under the tropical sun, a process repeated for weeks. During this curing, enzymes break down compounds within the pod, and slowly, gradually, the familiar vanilla scent emerges like a butterfly from its chrysalis. The pods turn dark brown, develop their characteristic wrinkles, and begin releasing the aroma of vanillin, the compound that defines vanilla's essence. This entire process, from flower to fragrant pod, takes nearly a year. The patience of nature, captured in a slender bean. Saffron costs more per ounce than gold, and for the most beautiful reason. Each tiny crimson thread is actually the stigma of a Crocus sativus flower, and each flower produces exactly 3 threads. To harvest a single pound of saffron, farmers must hand-pick approximately 170,000 flowers, kneeling in fields at dawn when the blossoms first open, carefully extracting those 3 delicate threads from each bloom before the sun wilts them. The harvest season lasts only 2 weeks each autumn. In regions like Kashmir and Iran, entire families gather before sunrise, their fingers stained gold orange, moving through purple fields like dancers performing an ancient ritual. These crimson threads, lighter than wishes, are then dried with such care that the slightest excess heat destroys their flavor. The world's most expensive spice is simply thousands of hours of human attention transformed into taste. Cinnamon bark curls because the tree is healing itself. When harvesters strip away the outer bark of a cinnamon tree and score the inner bark, they're creating a wound. The tree responds by contracting its damaged tissues, and as the bark dries, this contraction creates those characteristic curls, called quills. Each cinnamon stick is essentially a scroll of scar tissue, the tree's attempt to protect its vulnerable interior. The finest cinnamon comes from the thinnest inner bark of young shoots, paper delicate and sweet. In Sri Lanka, traditional cinnamon peelers, members of a specific caste who've practiced this craft for generations, can create quills so fine they're called quills within quills, nested tubes of bark fitting inside each other like a wooden telescope. The spice that warms your winter drinks is the tree's memory of injury, transformed by drying into something precious. Black pepper was once worth more than its weight in gold, so valuable that peppercorns were used to pay rent, taxes, and dowries. In medieval Europe, a pound of pepper could buy a person's freedom or secure a family's land rights. The phrase peppercorn rent still exists in legal language today, referring to a nominal payment, though this ironic pepper was anything but nominal in value for centuries. This tiny, dried fruit of the Piper nigrum vine sparked voyages across oceans, toppled kingdoms, and drew trade routes across 3 continents. Christopher Columbus was searching for pepper when he stumbled upon the Americas. Vasco da Gama's journey around Africa to India was motivated largely by breaking the pepper monopoly. Wars were fought, fortunes made and lost. Entire colonial empires built on humanity's desire for these wrinkled black spheres that grew on vines in a corner of India. The pepper in your grinder changed the shape of history. Inside each peppercorn lives a compound called piperine, and it makes everything else taste stronger. Piperine doesn't just create that familiar heat and bite, it actually increases the bioavailability of other nutrients and compounds, helping your body absorb them more effectively. This is why turmeric and black pepper appear together in traditional recipes across India. The piperine increases the absorption of curcumin, turmeric's beneficial compound, by up to 2,000%. Ancient cooks didn't know the chemistry, but they understood the synergy, the way certain spices amplified each other. Every traditional spice blend, garam masala, berber, ras el hanout, represents generations of empirical discovery, of patient experimentation, of noticing which combinations created not just better flavor, but better nourishment. The wisdom of spice pairing runs deeper than taste. Cardamom pods are picked by hand, one by one, because they don't ripen uniformly. On a single cardamom plant, you'll find flowers, unripe green pods, and ready-to-harvest pods, all at once. Harvesters must visit each plant repeatedly throughout the season, selecting only the pods that have reached the perfect moment just before they split open and release their seeds. Pick too early and the flavor hasn't developed. Wait too long and the seeds scatter to the ground. This selective harvesting happens in shade-dappled plantations beneath taller trees, often on steep hillsides, in places like Guatemala's volcanic highlands or India's western Ghats. Each pod weighs almost nothing. It takes thousands to fill a basket. Yet inside each small green capsule, those dark seeds hold an entire symphony of flavor: eucalyptus, mint, lemon, camphor, and something ineffably sweet all at once. Complexity wrapped in green. Cloves are flower buds that never got to bloom. When you hold a clove, you're holding a flower's potential, captured at the moment before opening. The clove tree produces these buds in clusters, and they're picked when they turn from green to pink, but before they open into white flowers. After harvesting, they're dried in the sun, turning from pink to the dark reddish-brown we recognize. If left on the tree, each clove would open into a beautiful flower, but once bloomed, the essential oils that give cloves their powerful flavor diminish dramatically. So we capture them in this in-between state, neither leaf nor flower, suspended in transformation. The compound that creates cloves, distinctive tasted gentalist so concentrated it was used as a natural anesthetic by dentists for centuries. One clove can numb your tongue, a flower that never was, powerful enough to silence pain. Nutmeg and mace are the same fruit wearing different clothes. The nutmeg tree produces a fruit that looks like an apricot, and when it ripens and splits open, it reveals a hard seed encased in a lacy, bright red covering. That seed is nutmeg. That red lace is mace. The same tree, the same fruit, two distinct spices with different flavors. Nutmeg warm and sweet, mace lighter and more delicate. For centuries, nutmeg grew only on a handful of tiny islands in Indonesia called the Banda Islands, a spice monopoly so valuable that the Dutch traded the island of Manhattan to the British in exchange for one nutmeg-producing island called Run. Think about that. New York City traded for a spice island 8 miles long. The Dutch considered it an excellent deal. Wars ravaged the Banda Islands for control of these trees. Today, a grating of nutmeg seems simple, even ordinary, but it carries echoes of that extraordinary past. Star anise isn't related to regular anise at all, despite tasting almost identical. Regular anise comes from a Mediterranean plant in the parsley family, while star anise grows on evergreen trees in China and Vietnam. Yet both contain the same compoundinide whole, creating that distinctive licorice flavor through completely separate evolutionary paths. This is called convergent evolution in taste, where plants on opposite sides of the planet independently developed the same chemical. The star anise fruit is stunning. 8 woody pods arranged in a perfect star, each point containing a glossy seed. These stars grow on trees that can live for 100 years, producing spice for generations of human lifetimes. When you drop a star anise into simmering broth, watching it slowly spin and release its oils, you're witnessing a molecule that 2 different plant families invented separately, continents apart, as if flavor itself has certain inevitable patterns written into nature's possibilities. Turmeric stains everything it touches, and this isn't an accident. The compound curcumin that gives turmeric its brilliant yellow-orange color is incredibly stable and binds readily to proteins and fibers, which is exactly why it was used as a dye for thousands of years before anyone thought to eat it. Buddhist monks' robes get their saffron color from turmeric dye. Hindu ceremonies use turmeric paste to mark foreheads and bless marriages. The spice is applied to the skin in beauty rituals across South Asia, leaving a golden glow that lingers for days. When turmeric stains your cutting board or your fingernails, you're experiencing the same chemistry that has colored cloth and skin for millennia. That stain is stability, is permanence, is a pigment so determined to bind with the world that it transforms everything it meets. The rhizome that grows beneath the soil, looking like orange ginger, holds this transformative power in concentrated form. Fenugreek seeds smell like maple syrup, and that's not your imagination. Both contain the same aromatic compound sotalini, which creates that distinctive sweet, burnt sugar scent. This compound is so powerful that eating large amounts of fenugreek can actually make your sweat smell like maple syrup, a harmless but startling side effect. In small doses, fenugreek adds depth to curry powders and spice blends across the Middle East and South Asia, a slightly bitter note that rounds out other flavors. The seeds are small, hard, and yellow-brown, each one containing this concentrated essence of sweetness. They come from a plant whose leaves are eaten as a vegetable methane Indian cuisine, proving once again that spice plants offer multiple gifts. The connection between a seed from a Mediterranean herb and the scent of sugar boiled from Vermont maple trees is one of nature's strange coincidences, a reminder that flavor chemistry crosses continents and categories. Sichuan peppercorns aren't peppers at all and don't taste like pepper. They're the husks of berries from a type of prickly ash tree, and they create a sensation unlike any other spice, a tingling, buzzing numbness on your tongue and lips, as if you've touched a gentle electric current. This feeling, called ma in Chinese, comes from hydroxylphesenchul, a compound that literally activates the nerve endings that detect touch and temperature. You're not tasting Sichuan peppercorn so much as feeling it, experiencing a tactile hallucination created by eating a dried berry husk. This numbing quality is why it pairs so perfectly with chili heat in Sichuan cuisine. The ma and the la spiciness dance together, each one amplifying the other. These small, reddish husks, often split open like tiny mouths, come from trees that have been cultivated in China for over 2,000 years, prized specifically for their ability to make your mouth feel like it's vibrating at a frequency just below sound. Sumac berries are ground into powder that tastes like lemon, even though they're not citrus. These deep red berries grow in fuzzy clusters on sumac shrubs throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East, and they contain tartaric acid and malic acid, the same acids that make wine grapes tart and apples crisp. When dried and ground, sumac becomes a garnet-colored powder that adds brightness to dishes without any liquid, a way of capturing sourness in dry form. In regions where lemons were historically expensive or unavailable, sumac provided that essential acidic note, sprinkled over grilled meats, stirred into rice, or mixed with thyme and sesame in the blend called za'atar. Sumac contributes a fruity tartness that's more complex than simple lemon juice. Each berry is covered in fine hairs that contain the concentrated flavor. So grinding sumac is really about breaking those hairs to release the acid within. Sourness, waiting patiently in a fuzzy red cluster. Asafoetida smells terrible in the jar, but transforms completely when cooked. This resinous gum, extracted from the roots of giant fennel plants in Afghanistan and Iran, has an aroma so pungent when raw that it's often sold in sealed containers and nicknamed devil's dung. The smell is sulfurous, reminiscent of rotting garlic and onions. But add a tiny pinch to hot oil, and within seconds, that offensive odor metamorphoses into something deeply savory and meaty, a flavor base that's been essential to Indian vegetarian cooking for centuries. The transformation is almost magical, one of the most dramatic changes any ingredient undergoes through heat. Jain cuisine, which prohibits onions and garlic, relies on asafoetida to provide the savory depth those aromatics usually offer. The resin oozes from cuts in the plant's roots, dries in the sun into hard chunks, and is then ground into powder, often cut with rice flour or gum arabic to make it easier to handle. What smells like death becomes the essence of life-giving flavor. Grains of paradise were medieval Europe's mystery spice, traded along routes so secretive that European buyers had no idea where they came from. Merchants claimed they came from the Garden of Eden, or from a river in paradise, or from lands so exotic and dangerous that only the bravest traders could retrieve them. The truth was simpler, but still remarkable. These seeds came from West Africa, from a plant related to ginger, and Arab traders controlled the roots so completely that they cultivated the mystery to maintain their monopoly. The spice tastes like pepper, but with floral, citrus, and cardamom notes, complex and bright. The seeds are small and reddish-brown, clustered inside pods that grow close to the ground. For a time, grains of paradise rivaled black pepper in value, then fell into obscurity as trade routes shifted and other spices became fashionable. Today, they're experiencing a quiet renaissance among chefs and spice enthusiasts. This nearly forgotten flavor being rediscovered like an old song suddenly played again after centuries of silence. Caraway seeds aren't actually seeds, but fruits, as are most of what we call seeds in the spice world. These small, crescent-shaped spices are technically fruits of the caraway plant, each one containing the actual seed inside. This linguistic confusion exists for cumin, fennel, coriander, and many others. We've been calling fruits seeds for so long that the mistake has become the common name. Caraway has a distinctive flavor, sharp, warming, with notes of anise and citrus, earthy and slightly bitter. It's the dominant flavor in rye bread, in aquavit, in certain cheeses. Yet many people couldn't identify caraway by name, even as they recognize its taste instantly. The plant has been used for over 5,000 years, found caraway seeds at Neolithic sites in Europe. Ancient peoples were baking caraway into their bread when they were also building Stonehenge, finding this particular flavor essential enough to cultivate and preserve. That continuity, the same taste thread running through 50 centuries of human meals, is quietly astonishing. Juniper berries, which flavored gin, take 3 years to ripen on the tree. The juniper tree simultaneously bears berries at 3 different stages: green unripe berries from this year, purpling berries from last year, and fully ripe blue-black berries from 2 years ago. Harvesters must selectively pick only the ripe berries, distinguishing between the stages while working among prickly needles. These berries are actually consta. Juniper is a conifer, related to pine trees, but instead of woody scales, juniper cones have fused into a berry-like structure with a dusty blue coating and sweet, resinous flesh. Each berry contains 3 seeds and a flavor profile of pine forest, citrus peel, and something wild and ancient. Northern European peoples have used juniper for thousands of years, burning it as incense, flavoring game meats, and fermenting it into spirits. When you taste gin, you're tasting the northern forest, the patience of 3 years of ripening, and humanity's eternal partnership with evergreen trees. Allspice is called allspice because it tastes like cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves combined. Even though it's a single berry from a single tree, Spanish explorers in Jamaica encountered this spice and, tasting it, believed they'd found all spices growing together on one tree, hence the name. The botanical name, Pimenta dioica, reflects the same confusion. The Spanish called it pimienta, thinking it was related to pepper. In reality, allspice is the dried, unripe berry of an evergreen tree in the myrtle family, native to Central America and the Caribbean. The trees can grow 60 feet tall, producing berries that are picked green and dried in the sun until they turn reddish-brown and rattle with seeds inside. That complex flavor, the trinity of warm spices, comes from a particular combination of eugenol, cineol, and caryophyllene in the essential oils. One berry, containing multitudes. Nature occasionally offers these perfect packages, these complete solutions that taste like careful blending, but are actually singular expressions. Paprika is made from peppers that are dried so gently they retain their bright red color instead of turning brown. In Hungary and Spain, where paprika traditions run deep, the peppers are dried slowly, sometimes smoked over oak fires, sometimes air-dried in specialized facilities to preserve the vibrant pigments. The type of pepper, the drying method, and even the parts of the pepper included seeds and membranes for hot paprika, only the flesh for sweet, all affect the final product. The result ranges from sweet and mild to hot and complex, from bright red to deep burgundy. What most people don't realize is that paprika is relatively new to European cuisine, arriving only after Columbus brought pepper plants from the Americas. Yet Hungary embraced paprika so completely it became central to national identity. The spice inseparable from Hungarian culture within just a few centuries. This New World fruit transformed Old World cuisines so thoroughly that the transformation itself was forgotten, the spice seeming as ancient and local as the land itself. Coriander seeds and cilantro leaves come from the same plant, but tastes nothing alike. The plant, Coriandrum sativum, produces leaves with that distinctive soapy citrus flavor that people either love or hate. Whether you enjoy cilantro is partially genetic, written in your DNA, and when it flowers and goes to seed, those seeds have a completely different flavor, warm, slightly sweet, with notes of lemon peel and sage. The same plant, two utterly different taste experiences, depending on which part you harvest and when. Coriander seeds are used whole or ground in curry powders, pickling spices, and baked goods across the world. They're small, round, and ridged, easily split in half to reveal two seeds joined together. Ancient Egyptians placed coriander in tombs, the seeds found perfectly preserved in pharaohs' burial chambers thousands of years later. Romans brought coriander to Britain. The spice spread along every major trade route, adapting to every cuisine it touched, proving itself endlessly versatile. One plant containing multiplicity. Mustard seeds are so small that 1,000 of them weigh about the same as a single grape, yet they contain enough heat to make your eyes water. These tiny spheres, yellow, brown, or black, depending on the variety, are mostly dormant flavor until you break them. Whole mustard seeds added to a dish provide texture and a subtle, nutty taste. But crush those seeds, mix them with liquid, and suddenly enzymes inside react with compounds called glucosinolates, creating the characteristic mustard heat, not a burning like chili, but a sharp sensation that goes straight to your sinuses. This is why prepared mustard must be made fresh or preserved carefully. The heat compounds are volatile and fade with time or heat. The mustard plant has been cultivated for at least 5,000 years. Its seeds mentioned in ancient Sumerian and Sanskrit texts, used by Romans who mixed the crushed seeds with grape must young wine, creating mustum ardens. Burning mustwich gave us the English name mustard, that sharp bite hidden in a seed smaller than a dewdrop. Cassia and cinnamon look nearly identical, but come from different trees on different continents. What most Americans call cinnamon is actually cassia, native to China and Southeast Asia, with a stronger, more straightforward, sweet spicy flavor. True cinnamon, sometimes called Ceylon cinnamon, comes from Sri Lanka and has a more delicate, complex, slightly citrusy sweetness. You can tell them apart by looking at the quills. Cassia tends to be thicker, often curled from one side only, while true cinnamon is paper-thin and curled from both sides into a tight scroll. Both belong to the laurel family, both contain similar compounds. Both have been traded for millennia, but they're distinct species that humans have used interchangeably for so long that most people don't know there's a difference. The cassia tree can live for hundreds of years. True cinnamon is harvested from young shoots that regrow quickly, 2 trees across an ocean from each other, producing such similar spices that we gave them the same name, yet they've never met. Tamarind pods grow on trees that can live for 200 years, producing fruit from their very first branching structure right up to their highest limbs. The pods are brown and brittle, containing a sticky pulp surrounding hard seeds. This pulp is intensely sour, but also sweet, with a fruity complexity that's hard to describe date-like, but acidic, with caramel notes. Tamarind is essential to countless cuisines. It sours pad thai in Thailand, adds depth to Worcestershire sauce in England, flavors chutneys in India, and provides the distinctive taste of agua de tamarindo in Mexico. The tree itself is beautiful, with delicate, feathery leaves that fold closed at night, and pale yellow flowers streaked with red. Originally from tropical Africa, tamarind has spread throughout the tropics, thriving anywhere warm enough to support it. Older trees develop massive trunks and spreading canopies, becoming gathering places in villages, their shade as valuable as their fruit. A tree that feeds generations with its sour-sweet gifts. Annatto seeds give food a golden orange color and a subtle, earthy flavor, and they've been used for body paint and fabric dye for thousands of years before anyone thought to cook with them. Indigenous peoples throughout Central and South America crushed these small, triangular seeds from the achiote tree to create red paste for ceremonial decoration, protection from insects, and spiritual rituals. The seeds grow inside spiky red pods that look like medieval weapons. When the pods dry and split open, they reveal rows of seeds covered in a waxy red coating. This coating contains carotenoid pigments bixin and norbixin that color everything from cheese to butter to smoked fish, that orange-yellow color in cheddar cheese. Often annatto, the spice provides color more than flavor, though it has a peppery, slightly sweet taste if you use enough of it. A bridge between food and art, between nourishment and decoration, between ancient tradition and modern industrial food production. Long pepper looks like a caterpillar and tastes like black pepper's more complex cousin. These small, finger-shaped spice clusters grow on vines in India and Southeast Asia. Each pepper actually a tight cluster of tiny fruits fused together along a stem. Before black pepper became dominant in global trade, long pepper was equally prized in ancient Rome and Greece, appearing frequently in Roman cookbooks and medical texts. It has a hotter, more complex flavor than black pepper, sweet and aromatic notes alongside the heat. But as sea routes improved and black pepper became easier to transport and grind, long pepper faded from European kitchens, retreating to its original regions. Today, it's experiencing a quiet rediscovery, chefs appreciating that layered heat and slightly sweet finish. The plant produces male and female flowers on separate vines, so farmers must maintain both to get fruit. An ancient spice, temporarily forgotten, returning like a story retold. Galangal looks like ginger and is related to ginger, but tastes like a pine forest crossed with citrus and black pepper. This rhizome, essential to Thai, Indonesian, and Malaysian cuisines, is harder and denser than ginger, with a more resinous, almost medicinal quality. While ginger is warming and sweet spicy, galangal is sharp and bright, adding a distinctive flavor that can't be replicated by any substitute. The rhizome grows underground, spreading horizontally, and is harvested when still young for the most tender product. Greater galangal and lesser galangal are two different species, both used in Asian cooking, though greater galangal is more common. The plant produces beautiful white flowers with pink-red streaks, growing on stalks separate from the foliage. In traditional medicine throughout Southeast Asia, galangal is considered heating and stimulating, used to treat everything from digestive issues to respiratory problems. Western cuisines barely know it, yet across half of Asia, it's as essential as salt, that sharp, bright note cutting through rich coconut curries and aromatic soups. Nigella seeds are called black cumin, black caraway, and kalonji, but they're related to none of those plants. They're actually the seeds of a flower called lavinamist, Nigella sativa, which produces delicate blue or white blooms surrounded by feathery bracts. When the flowers fade, they leave behind plump seed pods divided into chambers, and inside each chamber are small, matte black seeds with a pungent, slightly bitter, oregano-like flavor. These seeds have been found in Egyptian tombs, including Tutankhamun's, suggesting their importance in ancient times. They're sprinkled on naan bread in India, stirred into pickles in Bangladesh, and considered a cure-all in Islamic medicine. The Prophet Muhammad reportedly said they could cure anything except death. The seeds contain thymoquinone, a compound being studied for numerous potential health benefits. But before all the science, before the studies, there were simply these black seeds that cooks noticed made bread taste better, that gardeners noticed came from the loveliest blue flowers. Cubeb pepper has a little tail on each berry, earning it the nickname tailed pepper. These dried berries come from a climbing vine in Indonesia, each one still attached to its stem, giving it a distinctive appearance, unlike smooth, round peppercorns. Cubeb has a complex, flavor-peppery heat, with notes of allspice, menthol, and a hint of turpentine that's oddly pleasant. Medieval Europeans used cubeb frequently, but when traders tried to corner the market and prices rose too high, European cooks abandoned it for black pepper, and cubeb retreated into obscurity. Today, it's a specialty spice, used in Indonesian cuisine, gin making, and by adventurous cooks seeking unusual flavors. The vine can climb 40 feet into tropical forest canopies, producing clusters of berries that must be picked, dried, and exported from specific Indonesian islands. A spice that had its moment in history fell from favor due to economics rather than flavor, and waits patiently in the margins for rediscovery. Malab is made from the kernels inside cherry pits, and it smells like almond and rose had a baby. This spice is common in Middle Eastern and Mediterranean baking, particularly in Greek, Turkish, and Armenian pastries, adding a distinctive floral nutty note to sweetbreads and cookies. Making malab is labor-intensive. Cherry pits must be cracked open, the tiny kernels inside extracted, then dried and ground into powder. The result is pale, tan, and incredibly aromatic, losing potency quickly, so it's best bought whole and ground fresh. The flavor is delicate too much, makes things taste soapy but just right. It adds an indefinable something that makes people ask, what is that wonderful flavor? The cherry trees that produce the best malab are a specific species, Prunus mahalab, grown specifically for this purpose in regions that have treasured this spice for centuries. Inside each pit, a secret kernel. Inside each kernel, a flavor that tastes like spring. Szechuan peppercorns were banned in the United States for 37 years, not because they were dangerous to people, but because they might harbor a citrus disease. From 1968 to 2005, importing these tingling, numbing spice husks was illegal due to fears they could carry citrus canker, a bacterial infection that devastates orange and lemon groves. The ban meant that authentic Szechuan cuisine in America was impossible, that entire flavor profiles were missing from Chinese restaurants, that a generation of Americans grew up never experiencing that electric ma sensation when the ban lifted after establishing heat treatment protocols that killed any potential bacteriate, sparked a Szechuan food renaissance in the U.S. Suddenly, dishes that had been pale imitations became vibrant and authentic. The absence of one spice had created a decades-long hole in culinary culture, proving how essential, how irreplaceable a single flavor can be. Amsher is made from unripe mangoes, sliced thin and dried in the sun until they become stiff, grayish-tan wafers. In India, where mangoes are sacred fruit and symbolize love, taking those mangoes before they ripen and turning them into sour powder might seem sacrilegious, but Amsher provides something essential: tartness without liquid, a way to add acidic brightness to dishes that can't accommodate lemon juice or vinegar. The unripe mangoes are peeled, sliced, laid out on rooftops or special drying racks, and left to desiccate under the fierce sun. Once completely dry, they're ground into powder that tastes fruity, sweet-sour, with a hint of resinous green. Street vendors in Delhi dust Amsher over fried snacks. Home cooks stir it into chickpea curries. The spice captures summer's abundance and preserves it, turning fruit that would otherwise rot into something that lasts through seasons, a bridge between mango season and the months when mango trees stand bare. Grains of salim come from West Africa and taste like pepper mixed with chocolate and coffee. These long, twisted seed pods, dark brown and wrinkled, come from a tree in the mahogany family, and they contain seeds that provide one of Africa's indigenous spices, largely unknown outside the continent. The pods must be dry roasted to develop their full flavor, releasing aromatic smoke that smells like a campfire mixed with a coffee roaster. Ground grains of salim add depth to stews, soups, and spice blends across Senegal, Nigeria, Ghana, and neighboring regions. The flavor is warming, slightly sweet, with hints of cardamom and nutmeg alongside that distinctive cocoa coffee note. This is a spice that never entered global trade routes, that remained local and treasured, that represents African culinary traditions, independent of colonial exchange. The tree grows wild in forests and is also cultivated in home gardens, its presence marking the seasons, its pods collected when they fall to the ground. Pink peppercorns aren't peppercorns at all, but dried berries from a South American tree related to cashews and mangoes. These delicate, papery husks are so fragile they crumble at the slightest pressure, releasing a sweet floral fruity flavor with just a hint of heat, nothing like true pepper. They grow in clusters that hang from trees in Brazil and other parts of South America, bright pink and almost translucent when fresh, drying to a deeper rose color. For years, pink peppercorns were controversial. Some people claimed they caused allergic reactions, leading to import restrictions, though these concerns were largely overblown. The trees themselves were once considered invasive in places like Florida and Hawaii, spreading aggressively, though many people now harvest the berries from these nuisance trees, turning a problem into a product. The flavor of pink peppercorns is gentle, sophisticated, adding visual beauty and subtle complexity to dishes. They represent the ongoing evolution of the spice trade, new flavors still being discovered, adopted, and integrated into global cuisine. Kokum is a fruit that dries into dark purple, sticky curls that look like dried plums but taste sour and slightly sweet with smoky undertones. This fruit comes from trees native to India's Western Ghats, and it's essential to coastal Indian cuisines, particularly in Goa, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. The fresh fruit is purple-red, and when you cut it open, the rind releases juice that stains everything deep purple. These rinds are dried in the sun, sometimes packed with salt, until they become dark, almost black, and concentrated in flavor. When added to curries, soups, or cooling drinks, kokum dissolves slowly, releasing tartaric acid that brightens and balances rich, spicy, or creamy dishes. The fruit also contains hydroxycitric acid, which has led to kokum extracts being studied for various health applications, though people have simply been cooking with it for centuries without needing scientific validation. The kokum tree grows slowly, taking years to produce fruit, but once mature, it bears prolifically, each tree providing families with their sour seasoning for the year. Wattle seed comes from Australian acacias and tastes like coffee, chocolate, and hazelnut combined, a flavor profile no one expected from a native Australian plant. These hard seeds, protected by tough pods that rattle when dry, were roasted and ground by Aboriginal Australians for thousands of years, creating a nutritious, flavorful powder. The seeds must be roasted carefully to develop the complex flavor. Too little heat and they're bland. Too much and they're burnt. Once roasted and ground, wattle seed adds remarkable depth to both sweet and savory dishes. A native Australian ingredient that's only recently entered the global spice conversation. Different acacia species produce different flavored seeds, some more intense, others more delicate. The plants themselves are hardy, growing in Australia's challenging conditions. Their roots fixing nitrogen in the soil, their presence stabilizing ecosystems. This is spice from one of the world's oldest continuous food cultures. Indigenous knowledge meeting modern cuisine, ancient technique applied to contemporary dishes. Orpha biber is a chili pepper that's dried using a unique day-on-night method, creating a flavor unlike any other chili. During the day, the peppers are laid out in the sun. Then at night, they're wrapped and piled together, sweating in their own heat, developing complex flavors through partial fermentation. This process, repeated over several days, turns the peppers dark burgundy, almost black, and creates a flavor that's earthy, raisin-like, smoky, and chocolatey, with moderate heat that builds slowly. The peppers come from the town of Urfa in southeastern Turkey, where this drying technique has been practiced for generations. Knowledge passed from family to family about exactly when to sun, when to sweat, when the peppers have reached that perfect state. The resulting flakes are oily, slightly sticky, and complex in ways that standard dried chili can never match. This is terroir in spice form, a flavor impossible to replicate without that specific pepper variety, that specific process, that specific place. Monk fruit sweetener comes from a small green melon used in Chinese medicine for centuries, prized for its cooling properties. The fruit, called luo han gua, grows on vines in the mountains of southern China, and when you crack open the hard shell, you find sweet flesh containing Mogrosides compounds, 200 to 300 times sweeter than sugar, but with 0 calories. Monks in those mountains cultivated and used this fruit, hence the English name monk fruit. The fresh fruit is too delicate to export, spoiling quickly, so it's dried over low fires, turning the outside dark brown while preserving the sweet interior. For centuries, this was a purely medicinal ingredient in traditional Chinese medicine, used to treat coughs, soothe throats, and cool the body's internal heat. Only recently has the West discovered it as a sweetener, extracting those magrosides and turning an obscure medicinal fruit into a global sugar alternative. The vine still grows best in its native mountains, still produces fruit that must be handled carefully, still carries that centuries-old connection to monastic cultivation. Ajwain seeds taste powerfully of thyme because they contain the same essential oil thymol that gives thyme its characteristic flavor. These tiny seeds, looking like smaller, more delicate cumin, are actually fruits of a plant in the parsley family native to India and the Middle East. The flavor is intense, medicinal, sharp, slightly bitter, and a little goes a long way. In Indian cuisine, ajwain is often fried in oil at the start of cooking, tempering its sharpness while releasing its aromatic qualities. The seeds are also chewed after meals as a digestive aid, their powerful oils helping to settle the stomach. Pregnant women are given ajwain water in Ayurvedic tradition. Street food vendors add it to fried snacks and flatbreads. The tiny seeds pack such concentrated flavor that just a quarter teaspoon can perfume an entire pot of food. A plant from India containing the essential oil of Mediterranean thyme. Another example of nature independently discovering the same solution in different places. Curry leaves aren't related to curry powder and don't taste anything like what Westerners think of as curry flavor. These small, shiny leaves grow on trees native to India and Sri Lanka, and they have a complex aroma, citrusy, slightly nutty, with a hint of anise, completely unique and irreplaceable. The leaves are almost always used fresh because they lose most of their flavor when dried. A frustration for cooks outside regions where the trees grow. When you fry curry leaves in hot oil, they crackle and pop, releasing their aromatic oils into the cooking medium, perfuming everything that follows. The tree itself is beautiful, glossy, evergreen foliage, small white flowers, small black fruit sand in regions where it grows. Many homes have a curry leaf tree in the yard, its leaves plucked fresh for daily cooking. The compounds responsible for its flavor are complex and volatile, including linalool, alpha-pinene, and beta-creophylline in specific ratios found nowhere else. A flavor so distinctive that nothing can substitute for it. A reminder that some tastes belong to specific places. Kaffir lime leaves are actually from Makrot limes, but the name kaffir persists despite being a slur in parts of the world. These double leaves, looking like two leaves joined end to end, grow on thorny trees throughout Southeast Asia, and they contain oils that smell intensely of lime peel combined with lemongrass and something floral and mysterious. The leaves are used whole in soups and curries, shredded finely into salads, or pounded into curry pastes. The fruit itself is bumpy and wrinkled, rarely used for juice, but the zest is precious, grated into dishes for intense citrus flavor. The trees are relatively small, sometimes grown in pots, producing leaves year-round in tropical climates. When you tear a Makrot lime leaf, the scent is immediate and powerful, a concentrated burst of citrus floral perfume that's essential to Thai tom yum soup, Indonesian rendang, and countless other dishes. That double leaf structure is botanically unusual, two blades sharing one petiole, doubling the aromatic oils, nature's generous excess. Vietnamese cinnamon is so intense it can numb your mouth, containing higher levels of cinnamaldehyde than any other cinnamon or cassia variety. Grown in Vietnam's Quang Nam province, This cinnamon comes from cinnamon of Leroy trees that are harvested for their bark when they're about 20 years old. The bark is thicker than Ceylon cinnamon, darker, and packed with essential oils that create an almost burning intensity. A recipe calling for 1 teaspoon of regular cinnamon might need only half a teaspoon of Vietnamese cinnamon. This is the cinnamon of choice for professionals seeking maximum flavor impact. For Vietnamese pho, where cinnamon plays a subtle but essential role, for Danish bakers making the most intensely cinnamon-flavored pastries. The trade in this specific cinnamon is relatively recent, gaining international attention only in the late 20th century. Yet now it's prized by those who know that not all cinnamon is created equal, that origin and variety matter as much for spices as they do for wine or coffee. Sassafras was the United States' first major export, shipped back to Europe in the 1600s when colonists believed it was a miracle cure. The root bark of this North American tree, when dried and ground, smells like root beer in fact. Sassafras was the original flavoring for root beer until the FDA banned its use in commercial food products in 1960 because one compound, it contains safrole, was found to be carcinogenic in large doses. Traditional root beer brewers and Cajun cooks still use sassafras, though appreciating the distinctive flavor and arguing that traditional uses involve amounts far below any level of concern. File powder, essential to Creole gumbo, is made from dried ground sassafras leaves, which contain much less safrole than the root bark. The sassafras tree is beautiful leaves shaped like mittens, some with 1 thumb, some with 2 and. In autumn, they turn brilliant colors. Indigenous peoples used sassafras for food, medicine, and dye long before Europeans arrived. A spice that helped fund colonial enterprises, then fell from favor due to health concerns, yet persists in traditional dishes, its flavor too distinctive to fully abandon. Dried lime, called lumi in Persian cuisine, is made by boiling fresh limes in salt water and then drying them completely in the sun. The resulting limes are hard, hollow, lightweight, and tan to dark brown, with an intensely concentrated, sweet, bitter flavor. When you use a dried lime in cooking, you typically pierce it a few times and add it whole to soups or stews, where it slowly releases its complex tartness. The flavor is nothing like fresh lime, it's earthier, more mysterious, with fermented notes and a slight bitterness that adds depth. In Iraq and throughout the Persian Gulf, dried limes are essential, adding their distinctive taste to rice dishes, meat stews, and fish preparations. You can also grind dried limes into powder, creating an instant souring agent that carries that unique flavor. The practice of preserving citrus this way is ancient, arising in regions where fresh citrus wasn't available year-round, but grew abundantly in season. A way to capture the harvest and stretch it through the year. Aleppo pepper is named for a Syrian city that's been continuously inhabited for 8,000 years. A spice carrying the weight of human history. These coarsely ground red pepper flakes have a moderate heat level, fruity and slightly salty, often compared to sun-dried tomatoes with a kick. The peppers are traditionally dried in the sun, then ground and mixed with salt and sometimes a bit of oil, creating moist burgundy flakes that clump slightly. Aleppo pepper was relatively unknown outside the Middle East until Syrian and Armenian diaspora communities brought it to the West, where chefs fell in love with its complex, not too hot profile. The Syrian civil war disrupted traditional production, making genuine Aleppo pepper rare and expensive. though Turkish peppers from nearby regions now often carry the name. Every sprinkle of these flakes connects to that ancient city, to the people who've cultivated and dried these peppers for generations. Two traditions disrupted by conflict, but preserved by those who carry the knowledge wherever they go. Aonori is a type of seaweed that's technically not a spice, but used exactly like one, dried and crumbled, to add an ocean-fresh, slightly sweet flavor to Japanese dishes. This green algae grows in specific coastal areas, harvested, washed, and dried into paper-thin sheets that are then crushed into delicate flakes. The flavor is clean and marine without being fishy, adding a whisper of the sea to okonomiyaki, takoyaki, and countless other dishes. The color is a vibrant, almost electric green when fresh, fading over time, so quality matters. Nori, the seaweed sheets used for sushi, comes from different species and is processed differently, making aonori a distinct ingredient, despite sometimes being confused with it. The seaweed grows in tidal zones, attached to rocks, swaying in currents, concentrating minerals and umami compounds from the ocean. When it's harvested, dried, and crumbled, it becomes a way to add the essence of the sea to land-based dishes, a bridge between two worlds, plant and ocean meeting in green powder. Molob's close relative, cherry bark, is used in cough syrups and gives them that distinctive medicinal cherry flavor. The same compounds that make molob taste like cherries and almonds, particularly benzaldehyde, are present in cherry bark, proving the family resemblance. Wild cherry bark was a traditional remedy in Native American medicine and early American folk medicine, used for respiratory issues, and pharmaceutical companies eventually isolated and synthesized these compounds. Now that cherry flavor in medicine is usually artificial benzaldehyde, but the connection remains. From fruit trees to traditional medicine to modern pharmaceuticals to the flavor memory that makes children more willing to take their medicine. The cherry tree gives wood for furniture, fruit for eating, blossoms for beauty, and these hidden kernels and bark for flavoring, every part useful, nothing wasted. Telekari peppercorns are not a different species, but simply the largest, most mature black peppercorns from India's Malabar coast, sorted by size. Only about 10% of a pepper harvest qualifies as Telekari grade berries, left on the vine longer, allowed to grow larger, developing more complex flavor. These premium peppercorns are then sorted through screens, only those larger than 4.25 millimeters making the grade. The result is a pepper with deeper, more complex flavor than standard black pepper, more aromatic, slightly sweeter, with additional layers of taste. Some producers age Telekari peppercorns further, creating even more premium grades. This is terroir and timing meeting human selection, proof that even with the most common spices, quality levels exist, that attention to detail matters. The Malabar coast, where the best pepper has grown for thousands of years, still produces these premium berries, still maintains standards, still proves that geography and care create flavor you can taste. Sumac grows wild throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East, but not all sumac species are edible. Some are toxic. The edible species, Rhus coriaria, produces fuzzy red berry clusters that are safe and delicious, while other sumac species can cause severe skin irritation or illness. Ancient peoples knew the difference intimately, distinguishing safe from dangerous through careful observation and transmitted knowledge. The edible sumac berries were so valuable in Roman times that they were traded extensively, used to sour dishes before lemons became common in Europe. The berries grow on shrubs that can spread aggressively, creating thickets on hillsides, their foliage turning brilliant colors in autumn. Gathering sumac becomes a seasonal ritual in regions where it grows. Families, knowing their sumac spots, returning year after year to harvest the same productive bushes. This is wildcrafting, the practice of gathering useful plants from nature rather than farming them, an ancient way of obtaining spice that still continues in many parts of the world. Kashmiri chili peppers are prized for their brilliant red color more than their heat, which is relatively mild. These long, slender, dried peppers from Kashmir and neighboring regions create the vibrant red color in tandoori chicken, in many curry powders, in countless Indian dishes where visual appeal matters as much as taste. The peppers contain high levels of natural pigments but lower capsaicin than many other varieties, making them perfect for dishes that need color and flavor without overwhelming heat. During the harvest season in Kashmir, you'll see entire rooftops covered in red peppers drying in the sun, the landscape itself turning scarlet. The peppers are so important to Kashmiri cuisine that local cooks can distinguish between different varieties, knowing which ones provide the best color, which ones have more flavor, which ones are best for specific dishes. This specificity, this deep knowledge of a single ingredient, represents expertise developed over generations. Cubeb pepper was once so valuable that traders would literally go to war over the right to harvest and sell it. Pirates raided Cubeb shipments. Kingdoms negotiated treaties based on Cubeb access. Then, as black pepper became more available, and Cubeb's price was manipulated too aggressively by merchants trying to create an artificial monopoly, European buyers simply switched to black pepper entirely, and Cubeb went from extremely valuable to nearly worthless within a few decades. This economic collapse shows how spice values aren't inherent, but created by complex webs of supply, demand, transport routes, political power, and cultural preference. A spice's worth can change completely based on factors having nothing to do with its flavor. Cubeb didn't become less delicious, less useful, or less aromatic. It just became a victim of market forces. Today, it's a curiosity, a specialty item, a reminder that the spice trade has always been as much about economics and power as about flavor. Fennel pollen is called the spice of angels in Italy, where it's gathered from wild fennel plants growing along roadsides and in abandoned fields. This golden dust, shaken from the umbrella-like flower heads of fennel plants at exactly the right moment of bloom, concentrates all of fennel's flavor, licorice, citrus, sweet, herbal into the tiniest possible package. A pinch of fennel pollen has more flavor impact than a tablespoon of fennel seeds. It must be harvested on dry days when the pollen is ripe but hasn't yet been blown away by wind or washed away by rain, making the gathering time sensitive and weather-dependent. The pollen is too delicate to survive long storage or harsh processing, so it remains a specialty item, expensive and precious, used sparingly by those who know its value. This is ephemeral spice, the most fleeting part of the plant, captured at the most fleeting moment. Summer distilled into gold powder. Berber is an Ethiopian spice blend containing up to 20 different spices, and no two families make it exactly the same way. The name means hot in Amharic, though the heat level varies depending on the blend maker's preferences. Common ingredients include chili peppers, fenugreek, coriander, cumin, black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, and more, each one toasted separately, ground separately, then combined in specific proportions. Making Berber is traditionally a family affair. Multiple generations working together to toast, grind, and blend, the process taking a full day or more. The resulting blend is essential to Ethiopian cuisine, the foundation of Dorawat and countless other dishes. Each family's Berber carries their history, their preferences, their slight innovations on traditional recipes. This is spice as cultural identity, as family heritage, as living tradition that changes subtly while remaining fundamentally itself. Ras El Hanout means head of the shop in Arabic, implying the best spices the merchant has to offer. This North African blend, central to Moroccan cuisine, can contain anywhere from a dozen to over 50 ingredients, depending on the spice merchant's ambition and resources. Traditional Ras El Hanout often included ingredients now illegal or hard to obtain: Spanish fly beetles, belladonna hashish, though modern versions stick to legal spices like cumin, coriander, cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, pepper, cardamom, nutmeg, mace, and many others. Some merchants include dried rosebuds and lavender. Every spice merchant makes their own blend, their signature mixture, their pride. Buying Ras El Hanout means trusting the merchant's expertise, their knowledge of how flavors combine, their access to quality ingredients, their skill in balancing complex flavors. This is craft, artistry, and commerce combined, the spice blend as personal expression. Smoked paprika, pimenton in Spanish gets its distinctive flavor from peppers dried over oak fires, a process that takes weeks and can't be rushed. In the Lavera region of Spain, this smoking tradition has protected designation of origin status, ensuring that only peppers smoked in this specific way, in this specific place, can be called pimentón de Lavera. The peppers are spread on racks in smokehouses built specifically for this purpose, fires carefully maintained to produce steady smoke without excessive heat. As the peppers slowly dry, they absorb complex, smoky compounds from the oak, transforming their flavor entirely. The result is paprika with layers of flavor, sweet or hot, depending on the pepper variety, but always deeply smoky, with almost bacon-like notes. This smoked essence has become essential to Spanish chorizo, to patatas bravas, to countless dishes that define Spanish cuisine. A technique so important, it's protected by law, ensuring the tradition continues. Saffron threads must be harvested in a 4-hour window each morning before the sun rises too high and wilts the delicate flowers. Across the saffron fields of Iran, Spain, Greece, and Kashmir, harvesters work in pre-dawn darkness, their fingers moving quickly but gently, extracting those 3 red stigmas from each purple crocus bloom before the day's heat arrives. The flowers themselves only bloom for 1 or 2 weeks each autumn, making this an annual race against time and weather. Entire communities reorganize around saffron harvest, schools closing, family members returning from cities. Everyone needed for this brief, crucial window. The work is meditative, the same motion repeated thousands of times. The purple petals soft in your hands, the red threads accumulating slowly in baskets. By midday, the harvest is done, and the drying process begins, transforming fresh crimson into the dried threads that will color and flavor rice for the next year. This urgency, this brief moment when the world's most expensive spice is gathered, happens every autumn, as it has for 3,000 years. White pepper is black pepper with its outer layer removed, creating a completely different flavor profile from the same berry. After the peppercorns ripen and turn red on the vine, they're soaked in water for several days until the outer hull softens and can be rubbed away, revealing the gray-white seed inside. This process, called redding, involves controlled fermentation that adds its own flavor notes, earthy, sometimes slightly funky, complex in ways black pepper isn't. White pepper is preferred in light-colored dishes where black specks would be visually unappealing, but beyond aesthetics, it has a sharper, more focused heat than black pepper, with less of the fruity, complex notes the whole provides. In Chinese cuisine, white pepper is often preferred over black, providing heat without visual intrusion. The same plant, the same berry, transformed into something distinct through processing, proving that technique can matter as much as terroir. Long pepper was more expensive than gold in ancient Rome, appearing in Roman cookbooks more frequently than black pepper for several centuries. The Romans valued its complex, slightly sweet heat, using it in both sweet and savory dishes, grinding it into sauces, incorporating it into wine. Then trade routes shifted. Black pepper became easier to transport and grind, and long pepper slowly faded from European kitchens, retreating back to South and Southeast Asia, where it originated. This rise and fall happened over centuries, so gradually that no one noticed they'd stopped using long pepper, stopped even remembering it had once been the preferred pepper. Today, finding long pepper in a Western grocery store is nearly impossible, though specialty spice shops carry it for curious cooks and historical recipe enthusiasts. An ingredient can be essential for 1,000 years, then forgotten within a few generations. Its absence so complete that most people never know it existed. Horseradish is technically not a spice, but a root vegetable. Yet it's used exactly like a spice, grated, preserved, and added in small amounts for its fierce heat. The root must be grated fresh because the compounds that create horseradish's sinus-clearing heat are volatile, forming only when cells are ruptured and certain enzymes interact with glucosinolates. This is why prepared horseradish in jars contains vinegar. The acid stabilizes those volatile compounds, preventing them from dissipating. Fresh grated horseradish is extraordinarily potent, bringing tears to your eyes more effectively than onions. The heat going straight to your nasal passages, rather than burning your tongue like chili peppers. The plant grows vigorously, almost invasively, its large leaves creating patches in gardens and fields. The root can grow quite large, twisted and brown on the outside, white on the inside, waiting to release its fierce heat the moment it's cut. A spice that only becomes itself when wounded, when broken open, when exposed to air. Mace is more expensive than nutmeg, despite coming from the same fruit, simply because there's less of it. Each nutmeg seed is encased in a single lacy arelva mace, whereas the seed itself is solid and heavy. By weight, one nutmeg tree produces perhaps 10 times more nutmeg than mace, making mace the rarer, more precious commodity. The flavor of mace is lighter than nutmeg, more delicate, slightly more peppery and citrusy, preferred in dishes where nutmeg's heavier sweetness would be too much. Medieval Europeans used mace extensively, valuing it highly, though today it's less known than nutmeg, a supporting player rather than a star. The fresh aril, wrapping the nutmeg seed, is brilliant scarlet, almost shockingly red, like a woven net made of rubies. As it dries, it fades to orange amber, becoming brittle enough to crumble, yet resilient enough to require a spice grinder to powder it properly. 2 spices from one seed, the outer worth more than the inner. Nature's economics defying human expectations. Capers aren't seeds or dried fruit, but flower buds pickled in brine or salt, and they must be harvested before they bloom. The caper bush grows in Mediterranean regions, often on walls or in rocky, inhospitable soil where little else survives, producing buds that, if left alone, would open into beautiful white flowers with purple stamens. But harvesters pick the buds daily throughout spring and summer before the flowers emerge, because once bloomed, the flower is useless for culinary purposes. The smallest buds, nonpareil grade, are most prized, requiring the most labor to harvest, each one smaller than a pea. These tiny buds are then cured in salt or pickled in vinegar, developing their characteristic, sharp, briny, slightly floral flavor through fermentation, a condiment that requires daily attention, that captures potential rather than completion, that turns what might have been flowers into something salty and sharp and essential to Mediterranean cooking. Pomegranate molasses is made by boiling pomegranate juice until it reduces to a thick, dark syrup, concentrating the fruit's sweet tart flavor into something intensely complex. This isn't technically a spice, but it's used like one in Middle Eastern cooking, drizzled, stirred, added by the spoonful to create depth and balance. Making pomegranate molasses requires patience. The juice must simmer for hours, reducing by 3/4 or more, the sugars caramelizing slightly, the tartness intensifying. The result is almost black, thick as honey, with a flavor that's simultaneously fruity, tangy, sweet, and slightly bitter. A spoonful can transform a dish, adding layers of complexity that fresh pomegranate juice never could. In regions where pomegranates grow abundantly, making molasses is a seasonal ritual, capturing the autumn harvest in a form that lasts through the year. Proof that preservation techniques create new flavors as much as they extend shelf life. Shichimi Togarashi is a Japanese 7-spice blend that combines chili with unexpected ingredients like orange peel and seaweed. The exact composition varies by producer, but typically includes red chili, sansho pepper, Japanese pepper, roasted orange peel, black sesame seeds, white sesame seeds, hemp seeds, ground ginger, nori, and poppy seeds, though that's 9 ingredients, and makers select 7 from among them. This blend is sprinkled on noodles, rice, grilled meats, and soups, adding heat, citrus, brightness, nutty notes, and oceanic depth all at once. Some shichimi blends have been made by the same families for 400 years, their recipes closely guarded, their techniques passed through generations. The orange peel is keet, must be dried properly, ground finely enough to integrate, but coarsely enough to provide texture, adding a brightness that lifts the other flavors. 7 ingredients, creating harmony, each one necessary, none overpowering the others. The blend exemplifying Japanese culinary philosophy of balance and subtlety. Dried rose petals and rose water bring floral sweetness to cuisines from India to Iran to North Africa, the essence of gardens concentrated into flavor. The roses used aren't the modern hybridized florist roses, but older varieties, particularly Rosa damascena, specifically for their scent and flavor. The petals are harvested at dawn when their fragrance is strongest, then either dried for use whole or distilled to create rose water, a clear liquid carrying the soul of the flower. Rose water is intensely perfumed. A few drops can flavor an entire cake or pudding, while too much makes food taste like soap. Dried rose petals are added to tea blends, to spice mixtures like Ras el Hanout, to desserts and pastries. In Persian cuisine, roses are as essential as salt. Their flavor inseparable from cultural identity. The petals must be dried quickly to preserve color and scent, spread thin in shade to prevent browning. Flowers becoming spice, beauty becoming flavor, gardens entering the kitchen. Licorice root is sweet without any sugar, containing glycyrrhizin, a compound 50 times sweeter than sucrose. This dried root from the licorice plant has been chewed, brewed into tea, and used medicinally for thousands of years, appearing in ancient Egyptian, Chinese, and Greek texts. The flavor is distinctive sweet, slightly bitter, with anise-like notes and divisive. People tend to love it or hate it with little middle ground. The root itself looks like a twisted stick, brown and fibrous outside, yellowish inside, and it must be simmered or soaked to extract its flavor and sweetness. In traditional Chinese medicine, licorice root appears in more formulas than any other herb, considered harmonizing, able to balance other ingredients. In parts of Europe, licorice extract is concentrated, salted, and formed into candies so intense they're almost medicinal. The sweetness in licorice root isn't simple. It has a lingering quality, a complexity that unfolds slowly, changing as it stays on your tongue. Grains of paradise once sparked legends of rivers flowing through paradise and merchants risking death to gather them. Medieval Europeans denied knowledge of where these spices actually came from, invented fantastic stories that they floated down rivers from Eden, that they grew in lands guarded by dragons, that obtaining them required supernatural courage. The truth was more mundane, but no less interesting. Arab and North African traders controlled the roots, deliberately cultivated mystery to protect their profitable trade, and European buyers, frustrated by ignorance, created myths to explain what they couldn't understand. These reddish-brown seeds, aromatic and complex, were worth the mystery and the expense to medieval cooks who had limited spice options. Today, we can Google where any spice comes from, read about cultivation methods, order seeds to grow our own. The mystery is gone, replaced by knowledge and accessibility. Something is gained: understanding, availability, but something is lost. That sense of spices as precious things from unknown, possibly magical places. Aleppo pepper's fate illustrates how war disrupts not just lives but flavors, cultural continuity, and agricultural knowledge. When conflict devastated Aleppo and surrounding regions, pepper cultivation didn't just pause, knowledge disappeared as farmers fled or died, as fields were abandoned, as the detailed understanding of exactly when to harvest, how to dry, how to process, was scattered across refugee camps and distant countries. Some farmers carried seeds with them, attempting to recreate their pepper cultivation in Turkey, in Europe, in America. But terroir matters. The peppers grown elsewhere taste similar but not identical. Something about Aleppo's specific soil, climate, and traditional methods created that exact flavor profile. War doesn't just destroy buildings. It interrupts the patient accumulation of agricultural knowledge, the precise techniques refined over generations. Some Syrian farmers are returning, attempting to rebuild, to restore their pepper cultivation, carrying memories of how their grandparents did it, trying to reconnect broken threads of tradition. Kampot pepper from Cambodia is so prized that it has protected geographical indication status, like Champagne or Parmigiano Reggiano. These peppercorns, grown in the Kampot province's red soil, with its specific mineral composition and climate, have a complex flavor: floral, eucalyptus, slightly sweet, that distinguishes them from other peppers. But Kampot pepper almost went extinct, during Cambodia's Khmer Rouge period, when farmers were forced to abandon their pepper plantations and cultivation knowledge was deliberately destroyed as part of broader cultural erasure. After the regime fell, a few surviving farmers began replanting, rebuilding the industry from near nothing, using memories of pre-war techniques and experimenting to relearn what had been lost. Today, Kampot pepper is again recognized globally, but its recent history reminds us how fragile agricultural traditions are, how easily specific knowledge can be lost, how long it takes to rebuild what can be destroyed in just a few years of conflict. Epazote is an herb used in Mexican cuisine that tastes like oregano, anise, and citrus, with a distinctive gasoline-like note that sounds terrible but works perfectly with beans. The plant grows easily, almost weed-like, and in Mexico it's added fresh to simmering beans, not just for flavor, but because it contains compounds that reduce the digestive issues beans can cause. The name comes from Nahuatl words meaning skunk sweat, which gives you an idea of its pungent aroma. Yet, in the right context, long-cooked beans, quesadillas, certain soups, epazote is essential, irreplaceable. The dried herb loses much of its distinctive character, so epazote is almost always used fresh, limiting its use to regions where it grows. This is hyperlocal flavor, tied to place, carrying indigenous knowledge about which plants aid digestion, which flavors complement which foods, knowledge developed over centuries of observation and experimentation. Celery seeds seem like they should taste like celery, and they do, but concentrated and intensified to an almost bitter extreme. These tiny seeds come from a variety of celery grown specifically for seed production, and they're used in pickling spices, spice blends, and occasionally ground into celery salt. The flavor is powerfully celery-like, but also earthy, slightly bitter, with a persistence that lingers. In ancient Rome, celery was considered more medicinal than culinary, used to treat ailments and create wreaths for victors rather than eaten as a vegetable. The seeds were recognized as potent, carrying the plant's essence in concentrated form. Today, celery seeds appear in everything from coleslaw dressing to potato salad to Chicago-style hot dog toppings, providing that celery flavor without the texture of fresh celery, proving that sometimes we want the taste of something without its physical presence. Poppy seeds are harvested from the same plant that produces opium, though the seeds themselves contain negligible amounts of any active compounds. These tiny blue-gray or white seeds develop in the poppy seed capsule after the flower fades, and harvesting them requires perfect timing. Too early, and they're not mature. Too late, and the capsule splits, scattering seeds to the ground. The seeds are so small that a pound contains over 700,000 individual seeds, each one a tiny package of nutty flavor and crunchy texture. They're used in baking across Europe and the Middle East, scattered on bagels and breads, ground into fillings for pastries, pressed for oil. Eating poppy seeds in quantity can cause you to test positive for opiates on drug tests, the trace amounts enough to register, even though they cause no psychoactive effects. A seed from a flower, infamous for one property, valued culinarily for entirely different qualities, proof that single plants can serve multiple, contradictory purposes. Annatto seeds color foods, orange yellow, and many cheeses and butters look more golden than they naturally would. Butter from grass-fed cows is naturally yellower than grain-fed cow butter due to beta-carotene in grass, and cheesemakers discovered that adding annatto made all their cheese consistently colored regardless of the cow's diet. This wasn't deception, but standardization, giving customers the visual quality they'd come to expect. The seeds are so effective at coloring that many foods labeled colored with natural ingredients are using annatto extract. The plant, Bixa or Alana, is a small tree producing spiky red pods, and it's been used by indigenous peoples of Central and South America for body paint and fabric dye for thousands of years. When Spanish colonizers arrived, they saw indigenous people with reddish skin and assumed they were naturally red-skinned, not realizing the color came from annatto paste, a spice that colored not just food but history, that created misconceptions that persisted for centuries. Nigella seeds are mentioned in the Bible and the Quran, recommended by prophets, and called a cure for everything except death. These small black seeds have been found in archaeological sites throughout the Middle East and Mediterranean, suggesting use dating back thousands of years. The seeds have a slightly bitter, peppery flavor with notes of onion and oregano, used to top breads, stirred into cheese, and incorporated into spice blends across a vast region from North Africa to India. In Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad said, "Hold on to the use of the black seed, for indeed it has a remedy for every disease except death," elevating Nigella seeds to sacred status. Whether or not they cure everything, they've been valued across cultures and millennia. Their small, black teardrop shapes scattered through human culinary history, like punctuation marks in a very long sentence. Dill seeds taste quite different from fresh dill leaves where the leaves are bright and grassy. The seeds are warm and slightly bitter, with notes of caraway. The plant produces delicate, yellow, umbrella-like flower heads that eventually develop into these small, flat, oval seeds. In Scandinavian and Eastern European cuisines, dill seeds are essential to pickling, providing that characteristic flavor to dill pickles. Though the name can be confusing, many dill pickles use fresh dill leaves rather than seeds. The seeds are also chewed after meals in India as a digestive aid and breath freshener, sometimes sugar-coated to make them more palatable. The word dill comes from Old Norse dilla, meaning to soothe, reflecting its traditional use to calm upset stomachs and help babies with colic. A plant whose leaves and seeds serve different purposes, whose name references its soothing properties, whose flavor has been woven into preserving traditions across the Northern Hemisphere for centuries. Sicily, also called sweet Sicily or garden myrrh, tastes like anise and has leaves, seeds, and roots that are all edible. This herb grows wild in much of Europe, producing white flowers that develop into long, ridged seeds with a sweet, anise-like flavor. The seeds are traditionally used as a sugar substitute in desserts, added to fruit dishes to reduce the need for sugar, chewed fresh as a sweet treat. The roots can be boiled and eaten like parsnips. The plant has been somewhat forgotten in modern cooking, though it was common in medieval gardens, valued for its multiple uses and sweet flavor. Rediscovering Sicily means finding a plant that previous generations knew intimately, that served multiple culinary purposes, that's waiting in hedgerows and forgotten garden corners to be remembered and used again. Barberries are tiny, intensely sour dried fruits essential to Persian cuisine, adding bright acidity and a fruity note to rice dishes. These small red berries come from the barberry shrub, which grows wild in many parts of the world, but is cultivated specifically for culinary use in Iran. The fresh berries are mouth-puckeringly tart, but dried, they develop a concentrated sweet sour flavor with notes reminiscent of cranberries. In Persian cooking, barberries are often fried briefly in butter, with a bit of sugar, then scattered over rice pilaf as both garnish and flavoring. The barberry bush has thorns, making harvesting difficult, and the berries are small, making the work tedious, yet their flavor is irreplaceable in traditional dishes. The plant was once more common in the United States, but was eradicated in many areas because it serves as an alternate host for wheat rust disease, showing how spice cultivation intersects with agricultural policy and plant disease management. Malab gives Middle Eastern pastries their distinctive, slightly bitter almond cherry flavor, and it's made from kernels extracted from the pits of a specific cherry species. Each kernel is tiny, requiring many cherry pits to be cracked open to collect enough for even a small amount of spice. The kernels are pale cream-colored when fresh, and they must be ground just before use because their aromatic oils dissipate rapidly. Too much malab makes things taste soapy and unpleasant, but just the right amount creates a flavor that people notice but can't quite identify, a mysterious background note that makes pastries memorable. The cherry trees that produce malab cherries are small, often growing wild, rather than being cultivated, and the cherries themselves are too sour to eat fresh. This is a tree grown not for its fruit, but for the tiny kernels hidden inside the pits, an unusual agricultural relationship where the obvious product is discarded to access the hidden treasure within. Kala namak, or black salt, is actually pink when ground and smells distinctly of eggs due to sulfur compounds. This salt is used in South Asian cuisine, particularly in chaat masala and in vegan cooking, where it adds an egg-like flavor to dishes without any eggs. The salt starts as regular rock salt, which is then heated in a kiln with harrid seeds, amla fruit, and other ingredients. This process adds iron and sulfur compounds, turning the salt dark purple-black in chunks, though it becomes pinkish-gray when ground. The smell is strong, definitely sulfurous, but in small amounts, it adds a savory depth that's hard to achieve otherwise. This is alchemy, truly taking one substance and transforming it through heat and other ingredients into something with entirely different properties and flavors. The process has been practiced for centuries in India. The knowledge of exactly how hot, exactly how long, exactly which additives creating the best result passed through generations of salt makers. Orifa Biber's unique flavor comes from its unusual day and night drying process. Fermentation without full fermentation, oxidation controlled and measured. This technique developed in one specific region of Turkey and hasn't spread elsewhere, partially because it requires specific knowledge and partially because the pepper variety itself is local. The resulting chili flakes are oily, sticky, complex in ways that make other dried chiles seem one-dimensional. This is why terroir matters, why protected geographical indications exist, why some flavors can't be perfectly replicated elsewhere, even when the base ingredient is theoretically the same. The people of Orfa have been drying peppers this way for so long that no one remembers when it started. The technique simply part of local knowledge, something everyone knows, something passed from parent to child without ceremony or documentation until recently, when the wider world discovered these remarkable chili flakes. Saffron's stigmas are harvested from Crocus sativus, a flower that can only reproduce through human intervention because its sterilate produces no seeds. Every Crocus sativus bulb is a clone, genetically identical to all others, descended through bulb division from an original plant that appeared, possibly through mutation, thousands of years ago. Humans recognized this flower's value and have been carefully dividing and replanting its bulbs ever since, maintaining the species through deliberate cultivation. Without human care, Crocus sativus would go extinct. This represents one of humanity's oldest plant partnerships, older than written history, a relationship where neither human nor flower can abandon the other. We need the flower for its precious spice. The flower needs us to propagate it. Every saffron thread connects to this ancient compact, this mutual dependence formed so long ago that we can't even date its beginning. Grains of Salim show that Africa has its own indigenous spice traditions, independent of trade routes, dominated by Asian and American spices. For centuries, African spices were largely unknown outside the continent. Not because they weren't worthy, but because colonial trade focused on extracting resources rather than developing mutual exchange. Grains of Salim, Connie pepper, Negro pepper, alligator pepper, and others represent African flavor profiles that don't conform to European or Asian spice expectations, that reflect different culinary traditions, different ways of thinking about flavor. As global cuisine becomes more genuinely global rather than Europe and Asia-centric, these spices are finally getting recognition, showing up in adventurous kitchens, being studied and appreciated not as exotic curiosities but as legitimate, sophisticated flavor ingredients with their own histories and contexts. The spice trade changed human history more than almost any other commodity. Wars were fought for nutmeg islands. Columbus sailed west seeking a new route to spices. Colonial empires rose and fell based on pepper monopolies. Entire continents were discovered by Europeans seeking alternative spice routes. Cities like Venice and Amsterdam built their wealth on spice trading. The desire for flavor literally shaped the modern world, drew maps, created trade networks, sparked technological innovations in navigation and preservation, brought distant peoples into contact, often violently, and redistributed plant species around the globe. Today, we casually grind pepper or sprinkle cinnamon without thinking about this history. But every spice carries echoes of this complex, often brutal past. The flavors we enjoy emerged from centuries of human ambition, greed, curiosity, and desire for something beyond the ordinary. Yet, spices also represent something beautiful, humanity's endless quest to make food more interesting, more pleasurable, more varied. We didn't need spices to survive. Bland food can sustain life, but we wanted them anyway. We wanted flavor, variety, excitement, the sensory pleasure of complexity. This desire drove us to cultivate difficult plants, to develop elaborate processing techniques, to trade across impossible distances, to experiment and combine and refine. Every spice blend represents someone's creativity, someone noticing that certain flavors complemented each other, someone willing to try something new. Every traditional spice combination represents generations of refinement, countless meals, patient observation of what worked and what didn't. This is human culture in action, the transformation of survival into art, of necessity into pleasure. And spices connect us to place, to specific regions, with specific climates and soils and traditions. Real cinnamon can only come from certain trees in certain places. Saffron requires particular growing conditions. Vanilla needs its orchids and the patience to pollinate them. These geographic specificities mean that spices carry their origins with them, that flavoring your food with them creates connection to distant places, to the farmers who grew them, to the land that produced them. In an increasingly globalized, homogenized world, spices maintain diversity, maintain difference, maintain the importance of place and tradition and specific local knowledge. The spices in your kitchen cabinet represent thousands of years of human history, botanical diversity, cultural exchange, and the patient work of countless farmers and spice workers. They're small, ordinary objects that contain extraordinarily deep stories. A jar of cinnamon connects to ancient Egypt, medieval Venice, modern Sri Lanka. A tin of saffron connects to Persian gardens, Spanish traditions, Kashmiri fields. These connections exist whether we think about them or not, but acknowledging them, knowing even a little of their stories, enriches every dish we make. Perhaps most wonderfully, spices remain somewhat mysterious. Despite all our scientific understanding of flavor compounds and chemical compositions, we can't fully explain why certain combinations work, why some flavors feel essential to certain dishes, why we crave particular tastes at particular moments. We know the chemistry of vanilla, but not entirely why it comforts us. We understand piperine's molecular structure, but not completely why pepper makes everything else taste better. Some knowledge remains experiential, felt rather than explained, transmitted through cooking and eating rather than through books or laboratories. As you drift toward sleep tonight, think of the spices that have traveled to reach you. Think of saffron gatherers in dawnlit fields, their fingers moving quickly through purple flowers. Think of vanilla orchids opening for their single day of possibility. Think of pepper vines climbing trees in monsoon forests. Think of cinnamon bark curling as it dries. Think of all the hands that touched these spices, planting, tending, harvesting, drying, sorting, packaging, shipping, all so you could add a dash of flavor to your meal. Think of the patience required vanilla's year-long transformation, saffron's brief harvest window, cinnamon's years of growth. Think of the knowledge preserved exactly when to harvest, exactly how to dry, exactly which parts of which plants hold the most flavor. Think of the traditions maintained, family spice blends passed through generations, techniques refined over centuries, flavors that define entire cultures. And think of the simple pleasure of it all. The way cinnamon warms, the way cardamom surprises, the way black pepper wakes up your tongue, the way nutmeg mellows and soothes. These small sensory pleasures, these tiny moments of flavored joy, are spice's greatest gift. Not wealth or power or historical importance, but the simple fact that they make life more delicious, more interesting, more varied. Tomorrow, when you cook, perhaps you'll pause for just a moment before adding that spice. You'll remember the field where it grew, the hands that harvested it, the long journey it took to reach you. You'll appreciate not just the flavor, but the story, the connection, the quiet miracle of having the world's flavors available in your kitchen. But tonight, simply rest in the wonder of it all. Rest in the knowledge that humans have always sought flavor, always valued spices, always been willing to go to great lengths for the pleasure of taste. Rest knowing that this desire for deliciousness is fundamental to human nature, that making food better is one of our most ancient and persistent pursuits. Let these stories of spices settle around you like a comfortable blanket. Let them remind you that the world is full of small miracles, that ordinary objects contain extraordinary histories, that paying attention reveals endless fascination. Let them carry you gently toward sleep, toward dreams, perhaps scented with cinnamon and cardamom, with vanilla and saffron, with all the spices that have flavored human life for thousands of years. Thank you for traveling with me through the world of spices tonight. Thank you for your curiosity, your attention, your willingness to find wonder in these small, dried, seemingly ordinary things that are actually anything but ordinary. May your dreams be peaceful, your sleep be deep, and your tomorrow be flavored with whatever spices bring you joy. Good night,